Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the club-shaped cloth, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. This is the final part of our card suit series. We started with the heart, and then we added the diamond and the spade, and now, finally, we're going to wrap it up with our club. Let's get started. To make this pattern, I used a USH 5mm crochet hook. This one is by Furls. I also used 45 yards of Lily Sugar and Cream, which is a worsted weight cotton. I also recommend having a couple of stitch markers handy for this pattern. The finished club-shaped cloth is about 7.5 inches tall by 8 3/4 inches wide when made using this yarn and hook size. But remember, this entire club suit set is yours to have fun with. Use tinier yarn for coasters or delicate wall hangings, garlands. Make it big for a casino game night at work or for your next fundraiser. You can have a lot of fun with these patterns and really explore all the different sizes you can make. Let's take a closer look at our club-shaped cloth. Here's a closer look at our club. As you can see, it's made up of 3 lobes right here. 1, 2, and there's the third. These 3 are made individually, and then we worked one big border round that connects them all and makes our stem. So let's go ahead and get stitching. Okay, so to begin making our lobes, we start by putting a slip knot on our hook. Then we chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Now, this chain 3 will count as our first double crochet throughout the pattern, but you'll notice I stick with a chain 3 and I don't use a fancy chain 3 substitute. For this pattern and for the other patterns in the card suit series, I prefer to actually use the chain 3. After we've got that made, we're going to work 2 double crochets in the third chain from the hook. So that would be the first chain we made, the one right next to the slip knot. And I prefer to work in the underneath loop of that chain, but you can work into whichever part you prefer. So here at the end of row 1, we should have a total of 3 double crochets because we count that first chain 3. So now for row 2, we want to turn and chain 3 again. And now starting here, I could have started it on the first row. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to start using my stitch markers. And I'm going to put a stitch marker right in that third chain or the top of that first double crochet for row 2. Then I'm going to work 2 more double crochets right into that first stitch. So that chain 3 will count as our first. So as I add 2 more, we can say we have 3 double crochets in this first stitch in total. There we are. And then we're going to skip the next stitch and work 3 double crochets all in that last stitch. So we skip the middle one and work 3 double crochets in the last. And of course, that means working into the top of that chain 3. So there's our first one. And here's our second one. And here's our third one. So at the end of row 2, you should have a total of 6 double crochets in 2 groups of 3, just like this. For row 3, we begin again with a chain of 3. And when I do make the chain of 3 to count as my first double crochet, I like to make that third chain just a little bit bigger. It makes it a little bit easier to get back in there when I come back to stitch into it for the next row. So now I'll go ahead and put my second stitch marker in that stitch. Make sure we're working the right direction here, turn our work, and then we're going to again put 2 double crochets right in that first stitch. You'll see a pattern here. This is, of course, a variation of the granny stitch. So if you've worked that before, this probably seems somewhat familiar, as what we're going to do next is skip the next 2 stitches and work 3 double crochets between those 2 groups of stitches we had before. So you'll remember in the previous row, we had 3 double crochets, then we skipped a stitch, and we had 3 more. We didn't have a chain 1 or anything, but there's still a space there that we can put our hook. So that's where we want to put these next 3 double crochets, right in between those posts. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. There we go. So you can see We had our chain 3, 2 double crochets in the first stitch, skip 2 stitches, 3 double crochets between the previous and the next stitch, and then we're going to skip 2 stitches again and work 3 double crochets into the last stitch. And of course, that's the top of our chain 3 and right where we had our stitch marker. Now, if you can get your stitches in there with the stitch marker in there, that's fine, but mine really wants to be in the way. So we're going to go ahead and pull that out first, and then I'll put 3 double crochets right in here. So at the end of row 3, we have 3 groups of 3 double crochets, or 9 double crochets in total. Working that 9th one right now. And there we go. That's what it should look like at the end of row 3. And now we're ready for row 4. I'm going to start again with that chain of 3 and use my stitch marker right in the top there. Now you can forego the stitch markers at this point, but later on we will definitely need them to help line up our lobes as we attach them together. Now we're going to start just like we did our other rows with 2 double crochets right in that first stitch. There we go. And then we're going to work our way across the row in that granny stitch. So that means we skip these next 2, and we're going to work 3 double crochets between the previous and the next stitch. So right in that space right there, between the posts. Sometimes if you talk about working between the posts, people get confused and thinking you're talking about post stitches. But we're not going around the posts, we're going straight on through to the back of our fabric. There we go. So we've worked 3 double crochets between those 2 stitches, then we're going to skip 3, and then 3 more between the previous and the next. So right in that space. By doing this, we'll add another group of 3 stitches, increasing our stitch count at the end of row 4 up to 12. Not quite there yet, though. That's my 9th stitch. You can see 3, 6, 9. Now we need to finish it up and put 3 double crochets right in that very last marked stitch. Almost had room for it, but I'm going to set it aside and finish up those 3 double crochets. 1 and 2 and 3. There we are. Whoop. And with that, you can see 3, 6, 9, 12. We have finished row 4. And now we're ready for row 5, and we're going to start again with our chain of 3. But in this row, we're going to deviate just a little bit and start pulling in the sides already. We've got 3 of these lobes to make that we're going to join together, so we're already moving on from just our increases here. So we've chained 3, that counts as having worked in the first stitch, so then we skip the next 2, and 3 double crochets between the previous and the next. So between these 2 groups of 3, as we've been working all along. But we're not adding the other 2 stitches there to that side. We're going to start curving in for our shape here. So we want to get 3 double crochets all into that stitch right there, or rather that space, I should say. And then continue on across. We'll put 3, of course, between these 2 groups of 3. So there's our second one and our third. And then you can see we've got 2 more groups of 3 here. We want to do the same thing once more. There's 2 double crochets. And here's a third one. And then, of course, we need to mimic what we did at the beginning there. So that means we're going to skip these 2 and just work 1 double crochet right in the top of that chain 3. This time my hook decided to fit. There we are. Now I can go ahead and take that stitch marker out of the way. And this is what it should look like at the end of row 5 with a total of 11 double crochets. So now we're ready for row 6, and we're going to start again with our chain of 3. So we'll get that marked. And this time we are going to double crochet in that first stitch. So officially we'll have 2 stitches right there in that first stitch. But then we're going to jump all the way over here and work 3 double crochets between these 2 groups of 3. So there's 1, 2, 3. So really all the action for the shaping, as you can see, needs to happen along the edges. We want to work another 3 double crochets between these two groups of 3, between this previous group and the next group. There we go. And now, again, we want to always mimic what we did at the beginning on the end. So we're going to work 2 double crochets right into that very last stitch. See if it wants to fit with the stitch marker in there. Oh, not really. We'll move that one on out of the way here. There we go. Now it'll slide on in. We can work 1 and 2 double crochets right into that final stitch. And here in row 6, we should have a total of 10 double crochets. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now we're ready for row 7, which begins again with a chain of 3. So I've got that made right there. And then we turn, of course, if we haven't already. And what we're going to do now is skip the next 4 stitches and then work 3 double crochets between the previous and the next stitch. So remember, this chain 3 counts as working in this stitch, so we're going to skip 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means we jump all the way over here and work 3 double crochets right smack dab in the middle of the previous row. So there's 2 and 3. And since we want to be symmetrical, pull that up, there we go. That means we're going to skip these 4 and jump all the way over here and double crochet in that very last stitch. There we go. So now I can move that stitch marker out of the way and we can take a look. Here we are at the end of row 7 and we only have 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochets. Now we've got row 8, which isn't really so much of a row at all, and is the only time here where our chain 3 isn't going to count as a double crochet. It's just going to count as a chain 3. We chain 3 and immediately slip stitch back in that last stitch of the previous row. Well, or the first. Once we've turned, it becomes the last, right? There we go. So now we just finished off with that little chain 3 space above there, which is going to come in really handy as we work our borders. And I say borders because for the club-shaped cloth, we actually sort of have 2 borders in a way. We border each one of these lobes. Remember, we're making 3 of them total. And then we work one final border all the way around all 3 of them, which is where we add the stem at the bottom. So first we have just the border round, if you will, for each particular lobe. So I have worked that chain 3, slip stitched in that stitch. We're going to turn. We don't break the yarn. We keep going to begin our border round. We're going to start with a chain 1, and then we work 3 single crochets right into this chain 3 space right here. Remember I said that's the one that doesn't count as a double crochet? We're just going to go right around it. There's our first single crochet. I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker in there. And then I need 2 more single crochets. I'm just going right around the chain 3. I'm not trying to split it at all. For this particular pattern, having our border sort of stand out really bold and definitively is a good thing. So we want to use that to our advantage. After we've done that, we work 3 single crochets in the side of the next row. So that means we just go right around the post of this stitch right here. Keep it nice and easy. There's 2 and 3. Alrighty. Then we work 2 single crochets in the side of the next row. So we can stop and turn our work and look at it and figure out where our rows are. This is the side of our next row. So we have 2 single crochets around this post. 1 and 2. There we go. Then we work 3 single crochets in the side of the next 2 rows. So we go to the next one. 1, 2, 3. Same thing for the next one. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Then 2 single crochets in the side of the next 3 rows. So that would be the last 3. You can see 1, 2, 3. And each of those are going to get 2. So 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1 and 2. And you can see that brought us right back down here to where our slip knot is. At this point, we are going to chain 2. And if you notice, before I get to that, you'll notice mine wants to cup up a little bit like this. That can happen sometimes. You can go back and add an extra stitch if you find yours really wants to do this. But I also find, particularly with this yarn, all I need to do is give it a little tug, sort of block it basically a little bit with my fingers or my hands to get those stitches to relax a little bit and even out, and look at that, perfectly flat. So if yours is starting to cup up, just try giving a little tug like that, especially with these cotton yarns. Sometimes they respond really well to that. All right, so we've gotten down here to the bottom. We're not going to work into that first slip knot or that first chain here. Instead, we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and skip right over it. And then we're going to start working up the other side here of our lobe. So we then work 2 single crochets in the side of the next 3 rows. So we want to sort of look at our work. If you need to, turn it around, see where we're going. If you're getting disoriented, let's take a look. We had our 3 stitches here in our first row. We worked around this stitch. That's the one in the middle, so we want to ignore that one. We're going to go up this way, and we're going to start by working 2 stitches right around that stitch right there. So let me get my yarn back on my hook here, and we dive right in on that other side. So there's 1 and 2 around that stitch. 1 and 2 around the next. 1 and 2 around the third. Then I need to check my instructions again here. We have 3 single crochets in the side of the next 2 rows. So we go right to the next one. 1, 2, 3, and again, 1, 2, and 3. Then we are going to work 2 single crochets in the side of the next row. 1, 2, and then 3 single crochets in the side of the next row, and you can see that's brought us all the way back up to the top. So there is a third one, and when we've reached this point, you can give another little tug here on the stitches on that side if you need to straighten it out, and then we are ready to go ahead and break our yarn. So we can go ahead and cut our tail of our yarn here, and then what I like to do is use the seamless join to finish up each one of these. So to do that, I'm going to take a yarn needle or a tapestry needle, and I want to get that end on my needle. Of course, I managed to grab a small one. Let me grab a little bit bigger one here. Here we go. This one's a little bit bigger. Get the yarn right through there. There we go. So now what I like to do is what I call the seamless join or seamless finishing. I'm going to go ahead and remove this stitch marker, but I can see that this is the first stitch right here of the round. So what I can do right here is go to the next stitch with my yarn needle and pull that loop through. And what I want to do is sort of line up all these little V's at the top of my stitches and create another one on top of this stitch to replace it. So I go through that stitch and I come back down here to the stitch that I came out of. And I'm just going to stick my needle right down there and pull down. You might have to play with it a little bit. Give it a little zhuzh, a little wiggle, get it to look just right. You can get that loop to about the same size as the other loops. I find that it's usually a little bit of a nicer finish than when I join, break the yarn, and pull through to create a knot there. So the reason I want to go to the second stitch is because we're going to be joining some different pieces together here, and I want to maintain my stitch count. There we are. So you can see that way it just kind of looks like another stitch and I can work into it, and it's not quite as obvious. So that is how we make our lobes. You can go ahead and weave in your ends on those and make 3 of them, and then we can talk about how we're going to join them together. So now we've got all 3 of the lobes made, and we're ready to assemble and border and put on the stem. But first, we've got one step of prep we need to do, and it's going to require 2 stitch markers. We're going to mark stitches on 2 of our lobes. So go ahead and grab any one of them and find the chain 2 right there at the bottom. So we are going to count our stitches up the side of our lobe. Start counting from the chain 2 at the bottom. We're going to find that first stitch. Make sure I can make that really clear. Here's 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. That fourth stitch is where we want to put our stitch marker. So let's do that with this one as well. We find the chain 2 at the bottom. Right there's our chain 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. That fourth chain is where we put our stitch marker. And with that, we're ready to assemble. So if you're following along with the written pattern, we're now at the part marked Join Lobes and Add Stem. So now we're going to join with a single crochet in the chain 2 space at the base of the unmarked lobe. So that means we start with the one we didn't put a stitch marker in. We're going to set the stitch marked ones aside for the moment. And we find, again, that same chain 2 space right at the bottom. And here we can join with a single crochet, or if you prefer, you can join with a slip stitch, chain 1, and single crochet into that space, whichever you prefer. It's also known as a standing single crochet. I like to just put a loop on my hook, insert my hook right into that chain 2 space, or wherever we're supposed to join to in the pattern. For us, it's that chain 2 space. Pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Again, the main point is just to get a single crochet into that chain 2 space. Once that is made, we then single crochet in the next 11 stitches. So just like we started counting at this one when we marked our others, we're going to start counting there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right. And again, you can give that a little tug. Then we come to the part with some brackets. We're going to work 2 single crochets in the next stitch, then single crochet in the next 2 stitches twice. So, get that loop back on the hook. There we go. 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1, 2, single crochet in the next 2 stitches. 1, and the second one. Then we do that again. 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1 and 2 in the same stitch. Then 1 in the next. And 1 in the next after that. Then we single crochet in the next stitch. Work 2 single crochets in the next stitch. Single crochet in the next stitch. And then you can see we've come across the top and working our way back down. We single crochet in the next 2 stitches and work 2 single crochets in the stitch after that twice. So there's 1, 2, then 2 single crochets in the stitch after that. Then 1 in the next, 1 in the next, and 2 single crochets in the stitch after that. And that finishes that second set of brackets. Then we single crochet in the next 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. There we go. So what you'll notice is that leaves 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches unworked right there. This is where we're going to bring in one of our stitches that's marked. Doesn't matter which one, they should all be identical. So now what we're going to do, and this is the part that starts with the asterisk if you're following along with the written instructions, that's where we've gotten to. We're going to single crochet 2 together in the next stitch and in the marked stitch of the next lobe. Again, doesn't matter which one of the ones with a stitch marker in it. So let's do that. We're going to single crochet 2 together. That means we go into the next stitch and yarn over and pull up a loop. I'm going to drop that for a second, pick this up, find that marked stitch. I'm going to flip it that way so it's out of my way. If I can fit my hook in there, I can. Fantastic. Pull the stitch marker out of the way with everything marked on my hook here. Everything's just hanging on my hook. Find the working end of my yarn again here, attached to my skein. Yarn over and pull a loop up through just that second lobe. You can see how they're both right there. I'm going to take a moment though. I'm going to pull my loops down a bit. We're not going to be working back into this stitch. This is our final round. So let's go ahead and take a moment and pull these loops nice and tight before we do a final yarn over and pull through. There we go. Not so tight we can't get through, but we don't want this to be a loosey-goosey stitch. We want it to be nice and tight. So you can even pull back on your yarn, which normally I don't do when I'm stitching, but for this, when we want it to be nice and tight like that, that works. So with that made, then we're ready to start working around this second lobe. And see, we're going to be working our way all the way around them. So now we single crochet in the next 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then we have 2 single crochets in the next stitch, single crochet in the next 2 stitches twice. 2. So increase in the next stitch, that's 2 stitches in 1 stitch. Then single crochet in the next 2 stitches. Then we have another increase, 2 single crochets in 1 stitch. And then single crochet in the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2. Then we're going to single crochet in the next stitch, 2 single crochets in the stitch after that, single crochet in the next stitch, and then we have our single crochet in the next 2 stitches, 2 single crochet in the next stitch twice. So 1, get that back on there. Something about that point always wants my hook to fall out of the stitch. 1 and 1, and then increase in the next. And then 1 and 1 again, increase in the next. All right, then we single crochet in the next 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, close, 6, and 7. You can always double check your work. Make sure there's 4 stitches left right there. You can see now we're ready to bring in our 3rd lobe. And we're going to work the exact same series of stitches again, where we start with a single crochet 2 together in the next stitch and this stitch. So you can repeat that section, and I'll meet you when we've got our 3rd lobe most of the way finished. So here we are, right back where we left off, but we've added another lobe. I've worked around, single crocheted in 7, and normally, well, previously I should say, that's where we'd have another single crochet 2 together, but we've got our 3 lobes already attached, so we're all done with that. So if you go back to your written instructions, this is the point where we finished rep from asterisk once, and now we continue from there. So we single crochet in the next 4 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this should bring us right back down to that next chain 2 space at the bottom of this lobe. So we're going to single crochet right into that chain 2 space. And then we're going to insert our hook in the center lobe chain 2 space. So you can see this is the one we're working on now. Here's our center one and our far away one. So we find the chain 2 at the bottom, that center one. We're going to insert our hook right in there, like so. Then we are going to slip stitch in the first stitch of the round. So that means this whole border around. So that's way back. We can find the end of our yarn. That's way back right here. When we went in with that join with single crochet, or we put our single crochet in that first chain 2 space, that's where we want to put our hook. So you'll notice I've got my active loop. I'm through the chain 2 space of the middle lobe, and I'm going to insert my hook in that first stitch of the whole round back on this first lobe. I'm going to find my working yarn again, and now I'm simply going to slip stitch through all these layers. So we want to yarn over, and we want to keep this relatively tight here. We just pull right through all those layers and right on through our active loop, like so. So it looks a little crazy right now, but you can take a moment and straighten it right on out. You can see right there, we've created that beautiful club shape, and now all we have to do is add that stem. We can do that right away. We don't have to break the yarn or anything. It's still part of this round. So what we do now is we're going to chain 13. And we are going to be working back into these chains, so don't make them super tight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And if you were, for some reason, wanting to make your stem longer or shorter, you can absolutely do that. Just add or subtract more stitches. After we've done that, I'm going to skip the 2 chains closest to the hook, 1 and 2, and as I work up the chain, I'm going to be working into the underneath humps right here. I find it gives me a nicer finished edge for my finished project. So, as I said, I'm going to skip those 2 chains closest to the hook, and then I'm going to double crochet in the next 2 chains. So we'll start with this one. Here's 1, and then double crochet in the next. There we go. After that, we simply half double crochet in the remaining 9 chains back up the stem. I thought the half double crochet gave a really nice width, but again, for some reason, if you wanted a skinnier stem, you could switch down to single crochet. But I tried to make mine look most like the traditional card suits. So I'm just working half double crochets right on up our stem here in each stitch. I've got just a couple more to go here, so I'll see you in just a moment. So as you can see, I've now half double crocheted in each remaining chain from that stem. So now we can break our yarn again and find that yarn needle. And then again, I'm simply going to pull up on my hook here, set that somewhere where it hopefully won't roll away on me, and put that yarn end here on my yarn needle. And now I don't want to just leave this hanging out here. I'm going to go ahead and use this end to sew down my stem. So I want to come right back up here to the top. I can find what would be a good place for this to anchor in and look nice and steady. Whoop, pick up my needle again, and I'll just plunge my needle right where I want the top of that stem to lie. It's right about there, and I can pull it down nice and tight, like so. So from there, I can simply weave in my ends like I normally would, but you've finished your very own club-shaped cloth. And that's how to crochet the club-shaped cloth. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget, you can also get the heart, spade, and diamond-shaped cloths on mooglyblog.com. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day, and don't forget to like and subscribe.